Hello everyone and welcome to season 3 of our Budget Builds Monthly series. Whether it's your first time watching this or you've seen our previous Budget Builds Monthly episodes, a few things have changed, so let's check them out. Due to the short popularity of this Budget Builds Monthly series, this season we're going to be changing up a few things. For starters, every third month we will be posting a supercut video, which is going to be building multiple people's systems out, but when we get to that, we'll get to that. We made a few changes to our Google form, and that's pretty much about it. Now, let's see what Budget Builds Monthly is all about. Posting the first Monday of every month, I review your budget request submitted via the Google form down in the description below. Using this information and PCPartPicker, I tried to build the best bang for the buck PC within your budget, considering any constraints or platform preferences you may have. We usually make 4 builds, 2 AMD and 2 Intel, using either DDR4 or DDR5. We also check for deals on Micro Center and Newegg to see if we can modify the build to create a better PC within your budget. If possible, we also take a look at the used marketplace too. Next, we compare each build using online benchmarks and list out the pros and cons of the top options. This helps us figure out which build is best for you. And don't forget, we can't do any of this without your input. Speaking of the input, let's see how we fill out the Budget Builds request form. Now, a quick disclaimer to go with this: budget builds will be as close or slightly over the budget due to parts and availability, as well as sales going on at the recorded time. Now, our budget build request form is a little different than last season, but it's pretty much the same, just formatting is a little different. For your privacy, we do not collect your Google information. Just don't worry about that. You actually don't have to sign in. Budget builds do not include taxes, fees, or Windows keys unless specifically asked otherwise. Budgets will be in USD. Now, form factor preference, this will determine case size, as in this is the motherboard size we're going to pick. If you want a mini ITX motherboard, we will go with a mini ITX case, unless you want us to get a micro ATX motherboard and then a specific case size, just put here in other. For CPU and GPU preferences, if you want us to build an Intel only system or an AMD only system, and same thing for their graphics cards. If you have any other preferences or requests when it comes to CPU or GPU, like an Intel GPU, just put it here in the other category. Areas of focus just covers the hierarchical standpoint of how we're going to build out the system and spread that budget. If you want us to focus first on your CPU, then your motherboard, maybe your graphics card, we're just going to put the budget more focused towards those. Focus first, and then focus last. We'll just grab some generic and placeholder items for you, the user, to actually pick out later on. For already purchased or own system components, if you already have a power supply or a case or anything like storage, just put it here. Just specify specifically what you have, just so we can work that into the build and we don't have to worry about putting money towards something in that budget that you already have. No sense in buying 2 PC cases if you can just use the one you already have. For peripherals, if you are requesting any, like a mouse, a keyboard, a monitor, a headset, just press on the peripheral, and then the other just request what kind. For example, if you want a 1440p monitor, just hit monitor and then press 1440p in here. And then other request, no RGB or anything else you want us to know, just press in the other and then hit submit. And that pretty much concludes filling out the Google form. If you have any questions, just let me know down in the description below. So let's see what kind of system we're building out in this month's Budget Builds Monthly episode. This user has a budget of $900 USD, wants a gaming type of system, wants an ATX motherboard or form factor preference, no CPU or GPU preferences, focus on their GPU, then their CPU, the motherboard, and then everything else. Already has a 750 watt gold power supply, so it doesn't mean we have to buy another power supply. Wants us to get a monitor, but didn't specify what kind of monitor, so based on this $900 budget, we'll just do a full HD monitor, and then has a request of RGB. Alright, now that we know what the user wants, let's start out with our AM4 build and go from there. Before we get too far into seeing what kind of systems we can build out on this budget, here's a small template we're going to base our PCs off of. For storage, we went with the Crucial P3 Plus 1TB PCIe 4.0x4 SSD. This is for games and files that the user might have. And then we also have a Crucial P3 500GB PCIe 3.0x4 SSD. This is for the user's file system and any programs that they're going to need. We could technically cut this down to a 256GB SSD, but if we need to, we'll cut it down later on. For a case, we went with the Fantex XT Pro. It's a ATX mid-tower case. Comes with one non-RGB fan. So we did add a 3-pack of Thermalright 120mm RGB fans. And then our power supply, we just had a placeholder Corsair power supply since the user already has one. And then for our monitor, we went with a full HD 1080p 180Hz MSI G244F. It's around a 23.8 or 24-inch monitor that has a 1 millisecond response rate and a refresh rate of 180 Hz. So it is a good budget gaming monitor, and we have this entire template built out for $251.86. Now, if we dive into the DDR4, I just added a Corsair Vengeance RGB RS 8GB stick of DDR4 3600 CL18. Now, memory is a bit of a controversial topic. 8GB used to be the sweet spot for gaming. If we have room in the budget, we will upgrade, but it's a start for the user to possibly upgrade to down the line. So there's no sense into buying like a 16GB stick or a 32GB kit, and then the user has a worse off graphics card or CPU. So it's kind of just a start, and then we can build off of that. So we're going to modify this parts list and build out our first AM4 system. And here's our AM4 system with the Ryzen 7 5700X. It's an 8-core, 16-thread, 3.4 GHz boosted to 4.6. It does not come with a CPU cooler, so we picked the Cooler Master Hyper 212. It doesn't have an RGB fan on it, but I mean, we do have that Thermalright kit. We can always just get another set and slap it on our cooler. For our motherboard, we have the Gigabyte B550 Aorus Elite AX V2. It's our ATX AM4 motherboard. It does have the dual M.2s. We technically could swap out an M.2 to a SATA SSD and get a different motherboard, but it's perfectly fine as is. And then our memory and storage stay from our template build. For our graphics card, we went with the RX 6750 XT. Now the user didn't specify preference on GPU. And then everything else also stays the same for our case, power supply, case fans, and monitor, sitting at $873.31. Now we technically could take this $27 that we have and get another stick of RAM, or we could swap out to a different case. It's all up to the user. So here's our AM4 build with the possibility of getting a 16GB kit of RAM. Now later on when we do compare, we will also create a 16GB variant of this build. Now let's check out our Intel build. And here we have our DDR4 LJ1700 Intel build. For CPU, we went with the i5-12600KF. It's a 10-core, 16-thread, 3.7 GHz boosted to 4.9. We have that same Cooler Master Hyper 212 from our AM4 build. We technically could have switched this out with something else, but I mean, it's actually perfectly fine. For our motherboard, we have the ASRock H670PG Riptide. It's an LGA 1700 ATX motherboard. And then our memory, storage, video card, case, power supply, case fans, and monitor are all the exact same spec as our AM4 build. Now this motherboard does not actually have Wi-Fi, and the next step up motherboard that had Wi-Fi was actually a MIDI ITX motherboard, and the user specified they wanted an ATX motherboard. So we actually had to add a Wi-Fi adapter from Roswell, and it keeps the entire budget under that $900 USD. Now, if we went for a motherboard that did have Wi-Fi, that was ATX, our budget would have been at $920 USD, so $20 over our budget. Between the two, I'd rather spend a little bit more and get that motherboard, but we still have our bundle deals to take a look at, so we probably could get a decent motherboard spec that way. And here's our AM5 system with the Ryzen 5 8600G. It's a 6-core 12-thread, 4.3 GHz boosted to 5.0. For a motherboard, we went with the Gigabyte B650 Eagle AX ATX motherboard. Does have Wi-Fi and everything else we need. For memory, we went with the Patriot Viper Venom RGB 16 gig stick of DDR5 6000 CL30. Again, memory is a bit of a controversial topic. I mean, it's perfectly fine as is. And then our storage, video card, case, power supply, case, fans, and monitor all stay the same. Sitting at $898.05. So we are $1.95 under our budget of that $900 USD. Now we still have our Intel to take a look at and then our bundle deals, so let's hop right into Intel. And finally we have our Intel DDR5 build. For our CPU, went with the i5-12400F. It's a 6-core 12-thread, 2.5 GHz boosted to 4.4. Does have an included cooler. A motherboard, funnily enough being more expensive than our CPU, we have the ASRock Z790 Lightning Wi-Fi ATX LGA 1700 motherboard. And then our memory, storage, video card, case, power supply, case fans, and monitor all staying from our previous AM5 build. Sitting $7 under our budget. Let's check out some bundle deals, and then we'll finalize our lists out with some benchmarks. First up on the list is Micro Center. For AM4, we have $285.98 to find a CPU, cooler, motherboard, and RAM. And then for AM5, we have $310.71 to find a CPU, motherboard, and RAM. Alright, for our AM5 build, we could get this Ryzen 5 7600X, B650M Prime ATX motherboard, and a G.Skill 16GB stick of DDR5. Now it seems like that's the only bundle deal we can get, as nothing fits our AM4 budget. The only thing is, I don't think this thing comes with a CPU cooler, so we probably will be going over our budget a little bit. For Intel, on the other hand, DDR4, we have $302.96 to find a CPU, cooler, motherboard, and RAM, while our Intel DDR5 has $305.97 to find CPU, motherboard, and RAM. And all of these bundle deals look like they start at $400 USD. Actually, this i7-12700K starts at $280. So an i7-12700K, Z790 Pro, and a crucial pair of 8GB sticks, all for $279.99. Now the only issue with this bundle deal is that the CPU does not come with a CPU cooler, so we can actually add that Hyper 212 to this. So we'll grab our i7-12700K and then compare that to our Intel DDR4 build. But once again, before doing that, we are going to take a look at Newegg and see if we can finalize these builds out. So I've been shopping around on Newegg for a while now. It doesn't seem like we can actually build out any DDR4 or DDR5 systems on Intel or AMD for the budget that we have, or at least better systems than what we already quoted on PCPartPicker. So that being the case, we're going to grab all of our CPUs and compare them on some benchmarks, and then check out some gaming benchmarks and go from there. For CPU benchmarks on Passmark, we have our Ryzen 7 5700X from our DDR4 build, i5-12600KF from our Intel DDR4 build, our Ryzen 5 8600G from our AM5 build, and our i5-12400F from our Intel DDR5 build, as well as our i7-12700K from our Micro Center build, and then our Ryzen 5 5600X also from our Micro Center bundle deal build. Now on CPU scores alone, our i5-12600KF and our i7-12700K for Intel are our clear winners. And then for AMD, our Ryzen 7 5700X and our Ryzen 5 8600G are also our clear winners in that standpoint. So if you're looking to build a brand new Intel DDR4 system, I would go for either the i5-12600KF that we built straight from PCPartPicker, or you can go for the i7-12700K that we got using Micro Center's bundle deals. Now the thing with Micro Center bundle deals is you will be using their specific RAM set, but the user kind of specified they didn't really care about the RAM. Even though they did want RGB, it's just a choice. Now, if you wanted to go for a DDR5 build, you can put the 2 Intel chips we just covered into a DDR5 motherboard, but for AMD, on the other hand, I would actually get the Ryzen 5 8500G on the DDR5 platform, and don't even take a look at the Ryzen 7 5700X. Even though the Ryzen 7 5700X is better, we're building a fresh system out. Now, because they're all using the same graphics card, we only have to cut down to CPU testing, but because they are very niche CPUs, it's kind of hard to find gaming-oriented tests. Most people just do workstation style tests and then post those on YouTube. So all in all, I wasn't able to find them. So in the standpoint of our clear winners, go for the 12600KF or the 12700K if you want to do the Micro Center build, and then the Ryzen 5 8500G if you want to do DDR5. And that brings it to the end. User, I hope we answered your request within your specifications. Any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know down in the comment section below. All of these builds will be down in the description below. Don't forget to fill out that Google form, everyone, and I'll see you all in the next one.